healthcare system is broken, but it doesn't have to be. This is Revenue Cycle Optimized by Infinix Healthcare. We discuss the latest challenges in the revenue cycle space and provide actionable tips on how to overcome them at your organization.
Welcome everyone to this episode. I'm Stuart Newsom, your host, and today we're diving into the topic of AI agents and their role in healthcare automation. Now, AI agents are more than just automation. They bring intelligence to workflows, helping healthcare organizations optimize RCM, reduce administrative burdens, and improve financial outcomes. But what exactly makes an AI agent different from traditional automation? And how can they be effectively integrated into healthcare operations? Well, that's what we're here to explore today. And joining me in that discussion is Navaneeth Nair, Chief Product Officer at Infinix. And Navaneeth has been at the forefront of AI-driven innovation in healthcare, helping providers leverage automation and intelligence to drive efficiency and improve outcomes. So Navaneeth, it's always great to hear from you. How are you doing today?
I'm good, Stuart. Great to be here. And again, as you mentioned, it's a great time to be alive and building in healthcare.
Yes.
So really happy to talk about the topic and kind of all the progress that's happening both with Infinix and in the industry.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yes. The concept of AI agents is generating a lot of buzz across the industries. I know we were just talking about how you can walk into a trade show arena or look at any given website from a healthcare technology standpoint, and AI is plastered everywhere. But is this really truly a new innovation, or is it more than just repurposing existing capabilities with new terminology? And with that, why do you think AI agents are gaining so much attention right now?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I've been on some panels, and I'll be honest, I've heard a lot of healthcare providers and leaders actually express a certain amount of skepticism, Stuart, as your question seems to be laced with skepticism about whether this is just kind of new wine in old bottle, right? Kind of set up, right? And what I have to say is that some of this in terms of capabilities have existed, right? So we have for the longest period, for the last, let's say 5 to 10 years, we've talked about having the ability to do machine learning. And right at Infinix, we have been at the forefront of doing machine learning, predictive algorithms, things of that nature that essentially are part of the revenue cycle process, like we do in AR and others. At Infinix, we have also been at kind of at the forefront of actually doing automation, right? Which is essentially what was the case when people talked about a lot of capabilities within RCM. It was all about automation, and our automation usually meant being able to do a repetitive task and eliminate human effort to do that repetitive task. As long as the task was very concrete, you knew exactly what the input was, what the output was. It was very easy. So some of these capabilities have existed. So, and then the whole notion of deep learning, which essentially is what generative AI builds on, has been around for some time. But what is really actually causing the new inflection is essentially that we are now able to combine some of these technologies, right? So now let's talk about AI agents in particular. Rick, what is it that we're seeing? We are seeing that in the past, whenever we looked at tasks as simple or complex. If it is simple task, then we were immediately drawn towards, oh, can we do some RPA or some automation or some mechanism to it? But the moment task was slightly complex, we would come to the conclusion that no, we need still people to do this, and we need to hand off, workflow, all that good stuff. But what we're seeing is that with the ability of machine learning improvement to do reasoning, and we hear the term reasoning a lot in the conversations, it has become very much a capability that we can actually have, I would say, a machine agent or an AI agent actually perceive information similar to humans and do the task like a human would have done without explicitly programming every instruction into it. In the past, if you wanted to do something like that, you would program every instruction into the process. But now you can actually start doing that without programming every instruction. So those of you who have used ChatGPT or other forms, you know that you don't have to tell it everything, but it still can perceive information based on the data that's available to us, right? So I would say that's a completely breakthrough capability, right? So now when you combine that with your ability to execute a task, whether that is kind of get a pair response and look at the response and make sense of it, or send a request to a pair, or create a claim, whatever it is. Now you can see that these agents can actually be a significant step forward, right? So, as much as all the individual ingredients have been around for some time, what is really new is our ability to kind of put these all together to do use cases that in the past we did not even think were feasible, just from a machine perspective.
Mhm.
So in that sense, I would say the buzz is worthwhile, right? Again, it all comes down to execution and being able to solve a very focused problem within revenue cycle and a use case, and I'll talk about some of them. But it's more important to understand that the capability is new, but we still have, I would say, we still have a lot of work to do to make it real in what I call practical workflows. And that lift is not small. So as much as I am optimistic about the capability, I also remind myself that there is a grind ahead of us to make this real and valuable in terms of outcome for our customers.
Right, right. So there's a maturity process for sure. So
Absolutely.
anything new, there's going to be a process where it has to grow up. It has to go through that maturity. And right there, it's just kind of the information, understanding those concepts between AI agents as well as traditional automation tools like RPAs. You kind of touched on that already a little bit, but can you explain a little further, the differences between AI agents and automation tools like RPAs, just so like your average Joe may be thinking, they do look similar. What is the difference between?
Absolutely. And I get this question all the time, even from senior leaders who are trying to understand this construct. So I'll use an example, but the biggest thing to remember is what AI agents are capable of is a certain amount of autonomy to do a complete task because they have the ability to reason and make decisions. Right.
Mhm.
So that is the critical construct difference between that and an RPA. And we, as you know, we have done a lot of autonomous or automation agents here at Infinix, right? And most of the times when we're building these automation agents toward what we're doing is we are somewhat programmatically creating a rules decision tree that the agent needs to use, right? So if you're looking at an automation agent, the big thing is that you essentially have to program the decisions and the various decision trees and what action it needs to take in that automation agent. In case of an AI agent, you do not want to program that. It actually reasons. We prompt it to say that, hey, if you see certain kinds of these decisions, then take these actions. But we don't tell it exactly what decisions and the action kind of the decision action pair is not programmed in. So what that means is that even if there is certain amount of variability, the AI agent can actually tackle that like a human can do and actually solve for it. Now, there are limits to how much variability it can tackle. And at some point, some variability will only be dealt with humans. But to some degree, it can actually deal with variability versus the moment you actually had certain variability and you had to do it with a traditional automation agent using RPA or other forms, it immediately breaks.
Mhm.
So let's take an example, and I think the area that at Infinix we've been working long and hard for many years is our prior authorization, as you know, and we've had the construct of agents in our platform for the longest period, and I call them V1 agents, right? Version one agents, just like sometimes it's a little scary to think of agents kind of improving as V1, V2 because we kind of
Right,
start thinking about the movies and what
right.
might happen next when they grow up, right? But the V1 agents were essentially pure robotic automation with decision trees built in. So let's take authorization as a process, right? So there are 3 steps in authorization to determine if authorization is required, initiate authorization, and then follow up to get results. So in the past, if you did some kind of an automation agent, you would have to program a decision tree to say, oh, looking at this pair and a plan, I think we need to go to this source to do automation. Oh, wait a minute, that source is available via an API and we need to send this input. Oh, this source is actually a portal and we need to actually invoke some kind of an RPA, give it inputs. If the portal changes even slightly or has different output being produced immediately, the thing breaks. The agent is like, okay, I got some results, but I can't make sense of it because you didn't program that into me. So I'm going to just drop it manual. So we
Mhm.
would have the agent being able to do it when things are nice and happy and it's just structured, it would work well. But in many cases, as soon as there was a small variability in it, it would actually fail, right? That was, I would call agent V1, right? Think of that as what you would do in like a version one of an agent. And then the other thing in a version one agent that it could not do is the moment it needed to, many of the times during prior authorization, you need to submit the right amount of clinicals or answer clinical questionnaires. Agent particularly was not capable of answering clinicals purely based on looking at incoming clinical documentation. So we would, in most cases, within our platform, those tasks would immediately be handed to a human to do. And then the agent can take over and kind of do follow-up, which again is essentially more kind of just a repetitive task to follow up with the pair. But if the pair gives you information, whether it's peer review or denial, now the agent doesn't know anything. All it can do is throw it back to a human and say, hey, tell me what are they trying to do? So you can see the example, you still have the ability to have agents or automation agents, as we would call them. Now let's kind of take this and make them AI agents. In an AI agent scenario, and we are kind of actively in build for this, is you can actually make it an autonomous, just like a human agent would perform prior authorization. You can give it a clinical document. It can now look at the incoming plan and say, okay, I think I need to go to X source or Y source to get authorization. Identify how it can reach out to that source, whether that is through API directly or through portal. Understand the clinicals, understand what the requirements from the payer are, right? In some cases, the payers will ask you dynamic questions based on the clinicals. You end up entering a diagnosis code. I'm going to ask you these questions. Now, the AI can look at the question and say, yeah, I can answer these questions based on the clinicals I have. I can actually now fully autonomously initiate that authorization. So now you can see something that needed like human intervention and multiple steps in the past, even though you had automation agents working certain steps, could be turned completely autonomous, right? That's the big difference between what an AI agent can do and what the traditional automation agents or RP agents can do, right? That's how you should think about it, right? Now, can they do all kinds of tasks? Maybe not. But some of the tasks that I'm reflecting on, essentially, we believe that they can be adapted very well to do that.
Awesome. Awesome. So very impactful, especially in revenue cycle management. It seems as there's all kind of opportunities in revenue cycle management. And you shared, some good real world examples there. Just wanted to kind of elaborate on how do these AI agents improve claims management and reduce denials, while still requiring some of that human intervention that you mentioned earlier.
So I think when you think about claims, that there's an entire life cycle. If you really think about what is currently the problem with claims, is that you essentially have systems that are still reliant on humans correctly coding, humans correctly creating the charges and sending it out through the door. We are seeing payers actually ramp up the number of reasons why they denial. Even smaller things lead to denial. The third thing we're seeing is that payers are becoming far more sensitive to what I call the clinical aspect of the claim. That we are seeing that with United Healthcare and others, where there's a lot of information required denials, where they're saying, okay, you did this, but we want to get more information from you that justifies medical necessity to do this, as an example. So now, in this entire life cycle, you can now kind of transpose the autonomous agents that we were talking about, the AI agents. You could have an AI agent that actually looks at the incoming kind of charge that is going to be created, identify if it's complete and sufficient to actually to get first pass claim resolution. If it can actually predict any denial possibilities and actually take auto corrective actions, right? For example, oh, it might need information required. Let's attach the information out of the gate with the claim and send out the claim rather than just kind of wait on getting a denial and send the information. So these things are requiring information denial, high probability that we'll get that. Oh, there is a high probability that we have seen that you're kind of saying Medicare, but Medicare may be secondary, there may be a primary, we should go look for a primary. Well, let's go do discovery of possible other insurances before we submit to Medicare and get a kind of COB denial of some kind. So these are things now an autonomous agent can actually not only identify. So in the past, we would do predictive models that would actually identify them, but identifying was only one piece. Now you still had to give it to a person. That person had to go look at the claim, identify if there's a way to fix it, and then reprocess it. Now you could think of denial management or a claim submission AI agent that actually does this real time, actually performs the corrections and then sends out the claims,
Hmm.
further increasing your first pass resolution and having less denial in AR in the back end, right? That's an example of something that can happen from a claim management perspective. Now, going back to AR, right? AR is another place where we're still seeing, despite all that, you'd still see a whole bunch of AR because there's a lot of denials that are happening. Denial rates have gone up by 40% in the last year or two. So as your AR grows, now you can actually have an AR agent that essentially can identify the priority and the dollar value of a claim, right? Today, most of the time, an AR agents essentially look at the gross charges associated to that claim and say, oh, there's a $5,000 claim, I should work on it. But an AI could be smarter. It could actually predict actual recovery of that claim and say, hey, I believe this is a $5,000 claim, but we've in the past never recovered $5,000 for it. Or in many cases, even if you actually go after this denial, you're not going to get much value out of it. So I have not prioritized, let me work on something, right? So it can be smarter about it.
Mm-hmm.
And then actually identify what is necessary. Should I rebuild? Should I ask for recoding? Or should I create an appeal and actually automatically create the appeal based on the template for Aetna or Cigna or United and push it out the door? So you can understand how an AR could be really smart about it. Now, a lot of AR is also unresponding, where you're essentially waiting on the payer to tell you whether something has happened or not, or in some scenarios, they've done something, but you still don't have the remit, so you don't know whether it's processed. And people still follow up on these claims and try to find the answers. You could have a claim follow-up agent that actually does this, which we've been doing a lot of work on, where you can actually get out, find the results, and not drop any of that to human intervention. And automated claim status agent could actually take care of all your unresponded, no response ARs, then work it and take 30 to 40% of your volume and have just AI agents work it. So there is some very, I would say, promising areas within kind of the whole claim life cycle, denial and AR that at Phoenix we are working on. We believe others are working on that essentially will yield value.
Yeah, that's awesome. And there's so much potential there. And even not just potential, but some is a reality even today
Yeah.
as we speak. So this is not a futuristic thing. This is stuff that's happening now. And when I hear you speak about that, the one thing that comes to mind, at least in my experience in all my years in RCM, one of the biggest challenges has been organizations working out of silos. So I can see how AI agents can actually assist in breaking down those silos, where that communication goes across different variables of from early cycle, mid cycle to late cycle revenue cycle, management issues, from denied claims to denial prevention, from prior authorizations and to needing the clinicals, and kind of where the data needs to come from the provider, from the payer to the coder to the biller. So I can see a lot of remedies and applications even in that, making it a more cohesive unity within the organization. Just my food for thought there.
Totally.
So some of the biggest challenges, I know organizations always are facing challenges. Now, this is one more thing. Seems like one more wrinkle that they have to now implement AI agents. And so how can they overcome those challenges and what should they be looking at when they're faced with, hey, I gotta build some automation, or I gotta build an agent. I'm unique to everyone else. What's that process look like?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing to remember is that I think it's as much as it's an opportunity to lay out these agents, there are some kind of fairly large barriers that I think organizations have to think about. I think the first is just kind of existing systems. All the existing systems, including the best EMRs out there today in the market, they were all conceived in the early 2000s, so to speak, and they're essentially books of records, mostly with a database underneath and some kind of a human related workflow on top of it in terms of screens, right? If you think about most of these systems, they're really not built for AI agents to actually interact very well and work with. So that's an immediate challenge, right? You have to kind of be able to solve for the fact that even if you can build these agents, how do they work seamlessly with your existing systems, right? Interoperability has to be like a critical thing that you have to kind of evaluate. That's why at Infinix, we actually we have our AI agents deployed on our platform because we can control the interoperability. And so what we do is we actually integrate with the PM systems or the EMRs through traditional forms, HL7, FHIR, and others. So we can bidirectionally integrate and kind of update those systems because they are the books of record, final source of truth. But the work can happen on a separate platform that's kind of AI ready, AI built, right? That's essentially how we think about it. So that's kind of one area to think about, which is kind of this interoperability with your existing systems. Second is you have to remember if you want high degree of precision, and we value that, that's one of the other challenges is going to be some of these things can make mistakes, right? And the question is, what is our tolerance for mistake and what kind of process are we dealing with? So we have to be clear that we have a process to check the quality of these things, have a proper, I call it like a support system or a support team that's constantly monitoring, giving feedback and improving these systems. These systems are not like traditional IT systems where you build it and it just works the way you've defined it. They change over time. I mean, the more data they get, they change their responses. The newer models come in, the responses change. So you have to constantly be evaluating quality of what you're doing. You have to be evaluating the quality of the data that you use to actually make it better or fine tune it in many cases. The other one that we actually even see it within Infinix is change management and adoption. Because suddenly we are going to have a workplace where we have people and AI agents who have to work together harmoniously. And it's not going to be easy out of the gate because you will always find teams that say, oh, it doesn't do it as well as I do, or I think I can get there faster. I don't know why it is taking this amount of time. So you'll always have what I call detractors who complain about their cheese being moved
Right.
around. So you have to really kind of work with them on change management and make sure that they understand that a future workplace is going to be a workplace where human experts are going to work hand in hand with AI agents to perform any task. So that's an education that they have to go through. The other is, and you and I have talked about this, is regulatory and compliance concerns, right? Like, oh, what data are you giving it? What is the AI seeing? Who's seeing that data? Who's training the data, right? I'm pretty sure there are a bunch of lawyers who are really happy about this and feel that this is going to increase their business. But at the same time, as much as we want to make this progress, it'll have to go through the right kind of evaluation to ensure that it meets regulations. We are in a highly regulated industry. So having the ability to have some amount of explainability of why it did what it did is going to be important. And more importantly, the human oversight and quality thing I talked about earlier is going to be really important because somebody has to be accountable for these agents. You will still need a supervisor or a supervisory team that still is responsible for these AI agents, so to speak. And then the last thing is like most organizations, they have to struggle with kind of making ROIs, right? So they can't, most of the CFOs and even for large organizations that I've talked to, really don't have like time to just experiment, right? There is so much going on in their world. They're under pressure from kind of payers and Medicare and others in terms of reimbursement. So they want to see value quickly. So the question is, how do you deploy use cases where an AI agent immediately starts seeing value, right? So the question is, are you spending time investing to build one as a science experiment? Or are you working with a partner that essentially has proven it and can actually bring value to you as quickly as possible, right? Those are the big things I would say that organizations have to think about as far as I would say implementing these AI agents.
Sure. They've got to roll their sleeves up and get started. So looking ahead, it's always looking into the crystal ball, so to speak. What advancements do you see in AI technology, that we will further transform revenue cycle management over the next 5 years or so? It just when you think, oh, this has got to be it, there's always more, right?
Yeah, I mean, I believe we're just getting started, to be honest, Stuart. I think I was talking about autonomy to some degree. I expect more and more complex tasks to be fully autonomous, right? As you saw from some of the recent buzz around DeepSeek, which we heard came from China, but at the same time, there was a new model released by OpenAI called O3, which essentially can perform reasoning. So it can actually do step-by-step reasoning of tasks. So we're going one step further than just kind of being able to reason on simple tasks. We may be able to reason on very complex tasks and make judgments and plan executions. So I expect certain tasks that we're considering too complex today to continue to come under the realm of AI agents in some shape or form. The other thing is today we talk about like agent collaboration with humans. I think pretty soon we'll be talking about multi-agent collaboration among each other, where one agent is collaborating with another agent in terms of being able to do a task
Mhm.
or work in a process. So a process could be multiple agents doing different things, right? And agents, the way I kind of look at it is that eventually agents will have this concept of skills and competencies. So some agent might be very particular to saying, "Hey, I'm really good at doing claim denial remediation work for United Healthcare," versus I can do claim denial remediation. Period. Any payer I can deal with that because
Mhm.
I'm like a super expert across many of the payers,
Right,
right?
right.
So skills and competencies will be so we'll start seeing what I call multi-skilled agents that can actually do many things at the same time. The other big area is going to be conversational AI. I think it's already started, but we're seeing that many of the interactions today, we still have a lot of pick up the phone and call the payer, pick up the phone and call the patient provider. I expect a lot of that to become conversational AI in nature, where an AI based solution can actually make that call, get the right information, and update the right systems. Right. And then I think all of this would lead to, I would say, faster, higher interoperability between systems. Because I think today a lot of what is broken in revenue cycle is the fact that the systems don't talk to each other well, and there is these silos, as you mentioned earlier. I think the AI will start to help bind these systems much closer because you're not having humans kind of shift data from one system to the other and then shovel it back from the other system back in. So we'll start seeing some of that. And of course, there are a lot of areas, whether it's contract management or coding or others, I'm already seeing AI agents start become really good. I think they'll continue to get better and actually kind of become autonomous in many of these areas. So I think these are, I would say, big areas that we'll see progression on. I won't go as far as many people say, oh, we'll have autonomous revenue cycle. I'm a pragmatist. I think revenue cycle is too big, too complex, with too many challenges to essentially become completely autonomous. But I
Mhm.
can see some processes, process steps, or process areas becoming completely autonomous with very limited exception handling by human experts.
Nice, nice. Well, that's it for my questions. I'm going to now go to the audience. We do have one here, Navaneeth, that has to do with metrics. What metrics should organizations track to evaluate the effectiveness of AI agents in their revenue cycle processes? Sounds like a question for how do we keep AI accountable and measure
Yeah,
their
I think maybe somewhat flip answer to it is no different than you would keep human agents accountable, is how I would think, right? I mean, if you really think about human agents today and that do work, there are two indicators, right? One is output and the other is outcome. So in many cases, we are measuring output, how many claims did they work, how many calls did they make, how many claims did they process, things of that nature. So I think when you think about it, at the end of the day, it's about delivering those in terms of outputs, right? So those outputs are still relevant. But I believe the outputs are only the leading indicators, they're not the final metrics. The final metric should be the efficacy of the outcomes. And what I mean by that is, what's your first pass claim, clean claim kind of approval rate, right? How much AR denial are you processing and getting money back where you don't have write-offs? How much prior authorization denials do you see because you've not submitted the right information, right? What's your turnaround time on an authorization? Has it significantly improved? Right.
Mhm.
So I would say output measures to look, if you looked at the agent purely in the sense of a human agent doing work, but the whole point of implementing this is not just efficiency, it's about effectiveness, right? So effectiveness should be in outcome metrics, whether that is authorization approval rates, whether that is reduction in denial rates, reduction in write-off, first pass clean claim. I would have organizations think about both of them when deploying these. The output ones are good to initially track, like that they are at least being, you're gaining the efficiency and reducing kind of your human footprint to do the same work. But ultimately, you still have to look for the outcome metrics.
Absolutely. Well, we have one more question that we're going to sneak in. It's from Alton. Said, how do companies balance cost in deploying AI solutions while maintaining compliance?
Yeah, so I think the big thing on cost is and I kind of talked about this a little bit, is the question is, are you going to go experiment yourself, or are you finding a partner who actually has done the experiments on your behalf? That's number one, right? So that's kind of the first thing to think about, the cost. The second thing from a cost perspective, you have to think about is, are you going to have to figure out how to size for capital expenditure, whether that is in terms of infrastructure or software or other things? Or are you able to get an AI agent that actually you can actually buy a subscription, just like you can actually get a user on contract, right? So if I were out there looking for somebody to do AR for me and I was going to go contract a contract employee, I don't have to worry about benefits. I don't have to worry about health insurance. You have to think about the AI agent similarly. You have to say, hey, can I get an AI agent, but then I don't have to worry about building it or training it or teaching it. It knows how to do my work. I'm ready to pay it a subscription or a monthly full-time equivalent kind of cost to it. Hopefully it's 2 to 3 times more effective than the person who's working on it. As long as you can get that, then the cost issue is somewhat mitigated. But if you have to think about capital expenditure, then it becomes a challenge.
Right, right. Awesome, awesome. Well, I don't see any further questions. And that brings us to the end of today's discussion on AI agents and healthcare automation. We've really covered a lot of ground today, from understanding what AI agents are and how they differ from traditional automation to real world cases that Navaneeth has given some implementation challenges, even some compliance challenges, and even what the future of AI holds for RCM. So huge thank you, Navaneeth, for sharing your insights and expertise today. It's always such a great pleasure to hear your perspective, especially on AI, but really just anything in technology and RCM and how that's shaping healthcare. So thank you for joining us.
I appreciate. Always pleasure talking to you, Stuart.
All right. And of course, thanks for everyone else for joining us. If you didn't get your question in, or just feel free to reach out to us. We'll do our best to follow up with you. So stay tuned for sessions where we continue to explore innovations that are transforming healthcare.
Thanks for joining us. Subscribe to get notified when our next episode is online. For more information for how we can help you increase reimbursements at your company, check out our website at infinix.com. That's INFINX.com.